Hey, thanks for clicking on Wayne.com for this state championship edition of Inside the Zone. It's finally here, week 15 of the high school football season. And, you know, at the beginning of the season, if you had to pick one team, I think that was going to make a run down to Lucas Oil Stadium based on the class and based on what they had coming back, I think you would pick, most people would pick Woodlan.
Yes, sir.
So not a huge surprise, I would say, in most people's estimations that Woodlan is playing for a state championship this season.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, in the beginning of the season, if you said this team has the best shot, we would have said Woodlan has the best shot because of the team they are, the class they're in, and the competition they were going to play throughout most of the season. We felt, yes, Woodlan would be that team. Kind of been some hiccups along the way, some questions, obviously, but here we are. They've persevered, gotten through, and they're one win away from the state title.
They'll face Southridge at noon at Lucas Oil Stadium on Saturday. How do you see this coming together? Because Southridge is a team that, it seems on paper and in just hearing about what they do and looking at the stats, they're a lot like the Eastbrook team that, you know, Woodlan, I don't want to say they dominated because they only won by 1 point, but at times they dominated when it was strength on strength with Woodlan's defense against Eastbrook run game. Man, they held them to 160 yards, which is well below their average.
Yeah, well over 200 yards below their average and 4 first downs. And that was what really was jarring to me is you held the #1 team in the state to 4 first downs on its home field. And that was just humongous Herculean effort for the defense for Woodlan. Now you look ahead. Wing T out of Eastbrook, wing T out of Southridge. So what's the difference between the two? Well, Southridge plays a wing T out of the shotgun instead of behind center. So their quarterback is a very dual threat guy. He can throw it, he can run it, likes to hand it off to his back next to him as well. So those are the two leading rushers for Southridge, and that's the big thing. But in terms of overall scheme, a lot of similarities between what Woodlan prepared for Eastbrook and what they have to prepare for with Southridge on Saturday.
The Southwood quarterback, Jace Harder, 25 carries, 119 yards last week. Tucker Shank, 21 carries, 65 yards. Those are the two main guys that you were talking about. But yes, it is a different look, even though they run a similar offense, because Eastbrook's quarterback was a facilitator of the football. He wasn't asked to make a lot of plays in the passing game, wasn't asked to make a lot of plays in the running game, just kind of run the offense, game manager type, whereas this quarterback has the ball in his hands and decisions come down to what he's going to do. He was even 3 for 3 passing with over 100 yards last week.
Yeah, and Eastbrook couldn't pass for a single yard last week. Kind of showed you what their passing game was. And Eastbrook, too, is more prevalent to hand the ball off to their running backs and their flankers as well. With that wing T, you have split ends coming each way. Southridge really doesn't play that game. They don't really hand off to their flankers. Now they use it for fakes and counters, and they will give it to them occasionally, but not as efficiently and as many times as Eastbrook does. So it is a different look. You see wing T listed, and you say, well, that's exactly what they had to prepare for last week, when it's really not. But you can take a lot of the principles that you took out of that game plan and have them in place for Southridge Saturday.
You and I were both down at Eastbrook last week. When you saw the teams warming up, I think Woodlan had a physical advantage. They were a little bit bigger along the lines. According to Sherwood Haydock, that's not going to be the case this week. I mean, it looks like relative to what Eastbrook had, Southridge has some more size specifically in the trenches.
Yeah, he mentioned that today down at the luncheon at the state championship game, you know, preparing for all 6 games down at Lucas Oil Stadium that is the big difference in terms of an increased physicality out of Southridge up front. They really are bigger than Eastbrook. They're tougher than Eastbrook, and that jumped out to me because Eastbrook and Jeff Adamson, you feel that is a very tough football team, and they play tough. But now you're taking it up a notch a little bit with Southridge in a more tougher, more physical team. So how does Woodlan match that? And I think a big question, too, in asking Coach Sherwood Haydock is, you finally got over the hump with this team to get to the state championship after 3 years of trying. How do you make sure your kids aren't satisfied with just getting down there? And I think that's something he addressed today, too, as well as says, you know, that's something we have to tell these kids and is kind of guard against that. The positive is a lot of these guys are seniors that are leaving. This is their last game. And really no second chances for a lot of these guys coming up Saturday.
Yeah, not hard to get them motivated if it's going to be your last football game. Right. You want to go out with the blue ring, not the red one. When you take a look at Southridge's game last week, is there a lot you could take? Because that game was played on a Saturday afternoon like this one will be, but it was outside. Rain was an issue. They had I believe, a 2-hour lightning delay in that one. I mean, there wasn't a lot of continuity, would be my guess, in that game. Do you kind of throw that tape out if you're Sherwood Haydock and be like, this is how they had to play last week? Or do you think it'll be more indicative of what we'll actually see this coming Saturday? I mean, I guess you're not a weather forecaster, so
Well,
Although,
maybe we'll ask Nicholas Ferrari's over there. Come on over, Nicholas. Talk about Saturday's weather in Indy.
I'm going to say it's going to be, 72 degrees and sunny in Lucas Oil Stadium.
Yeah, they never open the roof up for Colts games. So
they never do, which is so perplexing. It was beautiful a couple times this fall, and they never opened it up.
Yeah, it's too nice. Too nice. But yeah, Coach Haydock said that again today, talking about practicing for this week, and he says it makes no sense to practice outside at all if you have the possibility not to. So Tuesday, Woodlan's going to practice at at Homestead on the turf, and then they're not practicing outside the rest of the week. They're going to be down at Lucas Oil Stadium Wednesday. They're going to be in their gym on Thursday, which Coach Haydock said we actually have good practices in our gym actually. So they're going to do that Thursday, and then Friday they're going to practice at the Plex or somewhere in town where they can be inside. So. Yeah, in terms of game planning and what you take out of last week's game, very difficult because of the weather conditions, and it's going to be perfect weather on Saturday unless they open the roof and somehow can't get it closed.
Jack Rhodes will be a focal point, obviously, of the Woodlan offense. 35 carries, 145 yards against what was a pretty vaunted Eastbrook defense last week. But the passing game never really got on track, other than the Alon Howard touchdown, which was a great pitch and catch from Justin Durkis to Alon Howard. Do you think that was more weather-related, and if so, will they carry a little bit more confidence into this game, knowing, hey, man, we can throw that out? It was freezing. It was hard to grip the football. It was hard to throw the football. I mean, Eastbrook obviously didn't pass for anything.
Yeah.
So was that based on conditions, you think, of Friday night, or should they be more concerned?
A little bit of both. I think Eastbrook did a really good job defending the pass. I think they were really quick with their corners and defensive backs to jump routes, and I think they were really on it. We talked about it Friday night is when they were throwing deep, Eastbrook was running stride for stride with them. Yeah. A lot of times we see Woodland receivers just run away from people with their defensive backs. So Eastbrook, I think credit to them. They did play the pass really well, but I do think, yeah, the weather factored in. Didn't rain, but it was very windy for the night. So, yeah, I think that affected it too. There will be no wind on Saturday. So I think, that's just going to help a 2,000-yard passer like Justin Durkis in perfect conditions on Saturday.
When you take a look at Woodland's history, obviously they've only been in the state championship once before this. It was back in 1981. These guys were not a glimmer in their father or mother's eyes at that point.
Not at all.
So how do they go about knowing that they've already made history at Woodland, but how do they go about knowing that, man, if we want to put a state championship in the trophy case, it's never been done before, the onus is on us at this point to go somewhere where we've never been before.
And that's the thing with Coach Haydock saying a lot of these guys are seniors. This is their last high school game they will ever play. And there's no next year or whatever. I mean, this is it. And you're playing on the biggest stage on Thanksgiving weekend down at Lucas Oil Stadium. So as long as complacency doesn't settle in now that we're finally there, we finally got over the hump, they have one more football game to play and one more football game to win. And if Coach Haydock can get it through his players' heads that they do have one more football game to win, I really like the matchup for Woodland. I really think this is very similar to what they faced last week in terms of scheme. Obviously different wrinkles, and they have to be as tough in the trenches, but they dominated Eastbrook up front, which none of us expected. We felt after what we saw with Adams Central and earlier this year, other games, that they weren't even going to be able to contend defensively with what Eastbrook was able to do offensively, and it was completely the opposite. Eastbrook couldn't do anything. The only reason why they rushed for 160 yards is because they had the ball so much, and they couldn't pass. So every play was a run. So I really like what Woodland has going into this game. It's step up. I don't know if it's a step up in competition. I really don't know. I think Southridge adds some different challenges, but overall, I don't think Southridge is as good a team as Eastbrook was. And you beat Eastbrook. So I think that they have all the confidence in the world going into Saturday.
And Luke Crilly has to be very confident when it comes down to the kick at the end. I mean, 22 yards, a game winner. I don't know if you got more pressure, except if it happens again this week.
Yeah, and that was fascinating to watch because we were trying to follow it and tweet and let people know what was going on, but they get down there, they lose some yardage, they have to rush, they have to spike it to get to fourth down, 1.5 seconds to go. Then Eastbrook calls the timeout, which I think was the worst call of the entire night and the biggest mistake out of Eastbrook, and that was a Eastbrook team that fumbled it 3 times and turned it over 4 times on down. So 7 turnovers for the game, and that was the biggest mistake they made because it allowed Sherwood Haydock to talk to Luke Crilly and see where his mind was at because he had a fake ready to go. May have worked, may have not have worked, but it allowed Luke Crilly too to kind of settle down as well and make that kick. So
yeah, especially he had a PAT that was blocked earlier in the
badly.
game, so he had like 3 guys coming in on that one, so it had time to really collect himself and get ready for that.
So we talk about icing the kicker. completely worked the opposite way on Friday night. Eastbrook shouldn't have called that timeout. But, yeah, you got to feel Luke Crilly's feeling pretty good. This entire team has to feel confident. And that's that balance between confidence and arrogance and complacency. As long as they don't cross that line, they got a great shot coming.
Well, if you're Woodlan, you're thinking, 2 weeks ago we went all the way across the state to play a pretty good team in North Newton without our best player, without the leading rusher in all Woodlan history.
Yeah.
We won convincingly then. Last week it was freezing, and we had to go to the #1 undefeated team in our classification, and we beat them and outplayed them more so than the score would indicate, I think. They have to feel all the confidence in the world, I would think, at this point.
Yeah, and you just hope you just beat undefeated #1. Don't feel like it's going to be easier on Saturday just because you beat Eastbrook. I mean, that's the big mindset. Where are teenagers' heads at? That's the big question.
It's a scary place to think about.
Right? Luckily, we're not there yet with our kids, but they will get there because we were teenagers one day, and it was pretty terrifying.
And it was frightening. It was frightening to think that we're on the other end of that stick. Final thing, what are you most looking forward to about this state championship game noon Saturday down at Lucas Oil Stadium?
I'm excited to see somebody different play in the state championship.
Yeah.
Last year we had Concordia, and that was so much fun because it wasn't the same old teams, and not to talk down to those other teams, but somebody different. It's going to be fun to see Woodlan play in there and a different group of kids, and Sherwood Haydock return. I mean, for over a decade he felt, man, I don't know if I'm ever going to get back because he was at Harding in 03 and 06 and got there 1 in 06, and he said, I just don't know if it's in the cards. And then he goes to Woodlan and completely transforms that program into what it is now.
How much of an advantage, I forgot to ask this, how much of an advantage do you think it is to have Sherwood Haydock, who has been there, done that, during his time at Harding? He's not going to be, not that coaches are intimidated by the atmosphere, but he knows what to expect. He knows what goes into this game, and he can relay that to his guys in a way coaches who haven't been there cannot.
Yeah, and he mentioned that today down at Indianapolis, and he said, first year learned a lot. Second year, we used some stuff from the first year, and now the third time down there, he can really reform things again. So, like we said earlier about the not practicing outside thing, he's learned that gains us nothing. All it's going to lead to is a pulled groin here or an injury here on the grass that we don't need to be practicing on grass. We're on turf in 70-degree weather. Doesn't make sense to be outside. So they have the luxury of going places this week to practice indoors, not counting tomorrow at Homestead, but that's on the turf. But those kind of things, you've been there before, you fielded out, you learn your kids, and it's the same kind of kid that he had at Harding. So it's not a different group of kids. It's the same type of teenagers that he dealt with at Harding, and he knows which buttons to push and what not to push, and that team's going to be ready to play come on noon on Saturday.
Well, we'll see if he pushes the right ones this coming Saturday, and we'll be talking about it next Monday here on Inside the Zone. For Justin, I'm Glenn. We'll see you next week.